Hi guys, I am just dropping in now to remind you that in September I'm going to be launching my Apple subscription podcast. So this is going to be a version of the podcast. It's going to be called the ADHD Women's Wellbeing, the Toolkit. And this is where I'm going to be bringing you all access to my bonus material, to solo episodes, to audio workshops, to the support, to the actual resources I know make a huge difference. I am desperate to be able to help more of you. And I know that the podcast has got such a big following, a loyal following, and I want to be able to reward so many of you who have been there from the start. This podcast has been going for 2.5 years. And in those 2.5 years, I've brought over 160 episodes to you with incredible guests. So I'm going to be bringing this bonus material and you're going to have more access, more information, more awareness. And it really is going to be a fraction of the cost of what you would pay for workshops, online courses. So please keep an ear out. The subscription podcast is going to launch in September. And I want you, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, to be the first people to try this out. Now back to today's podcast. Welcome to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Kate Moore-Youssef and I'm a wellbeing and lifestyle coach, EFT practitioner, mum to 4 kids and passionate about helping more women to understand and accept their amazing ADHD brains. After speaking to many women just like me and probably you, I know there is a need for more health and lifestyle support for women newly diagnosed with ADHD. In these conversations, you'll learn from insightful guests, hear new findings and discover powerful perspectives and lifestyle tools to enable you to live your most fulfilled, calm and purposeful life wherever you are on your ADHD journey. Here's today's episode. So hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Kate Moore-Youssef, your host, and this is a summer mashup episode where I am bringing to you 2 fantastic guests from past seasons and bringing them together so you can really gain more of their insights, more of their wisdom. And I'm excited to bring to you today 2 fantastic guests. One is Dr. Nicole Avena. Now, Dr. Avena is an associate professor of neuroscience at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City. And she's also a visiting professor of health psychology at Princeton University. And she's written fantastic books. And she is a research neuroscientist and nutrition, diet, and addiction expert. And her latest book is called Sugarless and covers the latest science on sugar addiction and how to overcome it. I really wanted to get Dr. Avena on the podcast because we can understand the link between sugar addiction, dopamine sensitivity and ADHD, and we discuss it in the full podcast, but I wanted to share with you today her clip. Here's Dr. Nicole Avena. You talk about this actually in the book with regards to sort of sugar versus cocaine. And we've got something in our brains called, I'm going to hope I pronounce this right, endogenous opioid system. And that is our pleasure response. And when I hear the word opioid, that is like serious addiction. So would you say that certain brains have a propensity for sugar addiction?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we've seen through the research. And so what is most likely happening is that there are people who are just born with a genetic predisposition to be sensitive to these dopaminergic stimulants. So that could be just due to pure genetics of, hereditary components, or it could be due to the fact that, things were going on while they were in utero or in early life that, could help to explain that or make those alterations in the brain. And I think that's really what's happening in many cases these days, is that people are being born at this higher risk, essentially. And normally that would probably be okay, but we are in a situation where we have all of these dopaminergic stimuli all the time. And, it's the food, right? It's, we have our highly processed foods with these exorbitant amounts of sugar in them that are going to cause this release of dopamine in the brain when you eat them. That's like the release of dopamine that you would get if you, smoked a cigarette or used morphine or used a drug. And I think that for many people, that is what can be really compromising for them, because it's not something that you can just stop, right? When we talk about an addiction, I think it's so important that we remember that addiction is not a moral failing. You don't have control, and it's a brain condition. And when we don't have that ability to, just say stop, we don't want to use this or do that, it can really, really make it so much more difficult for people to change their behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we don't give enough credit to the fact that sugar is absolutely everywhere. You can't go anywhere, gas stations, supermarkets, corner shops, anywhere you're with your kids, for sure, that there is sugar being sold. And, we're trying really hard here in the UK to remove sugar from like the checkout tills and make it further away in the supermarket aisles, all these little things that we can try and hack our brain or trick our brain. But if, you've got an addiction to tobacco or to drugs or to alcohol, and we're going through that process of trying to get clean, we can try and avoid those areas, those triggers, and not go into shops where they sell alcohol or restaurants or bars or, anywhere that sells tobacco. But with sugar, it's just there constantly on, TV advertisements. You go to the movies, all of these places. And so what do you think? I mean, are we getting worse as a society? Have we hit that peak? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. It's probably worse in the US for sure in terms of the pervasiveness of
Yeah.
sugar. It's interesting when I talk about this to people, I will often give the analogy of, we have a little bit of sugar kind of sprinkled in pretty much everything. It's a little bit here, a little bit there. Could you imagine if we had a little bit of cocaine, in some of these products and a little bit over here, all together? Yeah, it adds up and it means something and it's damaging our health. But what we're seeing is that with sugar, for some reason, it kind of gets a pass. And people just sort of say, oh, well, it's just let the kids have a candy or let them have, it's not taken very seriously. And it wouldn't be an issue if the kids weren't getting sugar all day long from basically everything that they're consuming, because there's so much added sugar all over the place. I think that we are at the point where people are starting to step back and look at the situation and realize, like you had just said, you can't go anywhere without having sugar thrown in your face, without it just, you can't even go to the gas station. You can't even go, to the store to pick up like, office supplies without being offered, candy bars. And so I think that we are now starting to see that people are really starting to get concerned, because what's happening is that so many young people, especially children, are developing things like type 2 diabetes, like fatty liver disease. And these are conditions that you used to only see in very sick adults. It comes back to the dopamine. I think that there are certain individuals who have a very highly sensitive dopamine system where, something can excite them a lot, right? And something that, for example, sugar, we've done lots of studies looking at sugar and dopamine, but one study in particular that stands out with respect to this question has to do with a study that we did where we gave the rats that were in our studies sugar to consume, and the control group just had healthy food. And then we gave them all an injection of amphetamine, which is a dopaminergic drug. And when we looked at the dopamine levels, the rats that had been eating sugar showed a greater dopamine release in response to amphetamine. And so this really just shows that the sugar can prime the dopamine system to then become overactivated in response to a stimuli. So if a child has lots of sweets and then they're at a party where there's like chaos and excitement, like that can trigger them then to have this exaggerated response. And I think for some individuals, they are able to then, have some control and be able to calm themselves down. But for many, that's not the case. And it's not something that, when we're talking about neurochemical release in the brain and these biological things happening, sometimes when you say, okay, you need to calm down, like that's just not going to work, right? We have to wait for the neurochemicals to restore themselves into the proper balance. So I really think that that's what's happening. And I think it's happening a lot these days to lots of children, lots of adults, because again, we are setting ourselves up for this by our diet. When we're eating a diet that, even things that are healthy these days, like a granola bar, for example, you can have what's marketed to be a protein bar or a healthy granola bar as a snack and think that you're doing something good for your health, but the reality is you're binging on sugar. Even if you have a small little piece of a bar, there's a lot of sugar in those. And so you don't have to consume this enormous volume of food for it to be a sugar binge. There's enough sugar concentrated into small amounts of food that most people are binging on it all day long and they don't even realize it. And that binge is spiking your dopamine system. That's then going to make it such that when you encounter a stressor or you encounter something else later on, you're going to be sensitive to it and you're going to react in a way that you probably wouldn't have if your dopamine system wasn't so dysregulated by the sugar.
There's so many parents that listen to this podcast and we just don't know what the right thing to do is, the wrong. And yeah, I just wondered what your advice was.
Yeah, no, it's such an important question. And, I can relate. I'm a parent too. I have two daughters, 15 and 8. And, I think that for me, the best thing is to really give them those foundational skills so that they can make proper, healthy choices. And so I think that having them, exposed to some of these things so that they can learn to set their own limits is important, because if you go that direction where you say, no, we're not allowed to have any of this and we're, not having any of it in our home and avoid it at all costs, then I think you do run the risk of the kids not knowing how to act when they are around it, right? So when they go over their friend's house, then they just, go crazy and have tons and tons of candy because they finally get access to it. So what I think is a option that works for the teens, especially in kids, is focusing more on the immediate effects of having too much sugar. So knowing that, hey, you know what, if you're going to eat all these candies, it's actually going to cause inflammation and that's going to give you brain fog and you're not going to be able to do as well on your tests that you have at school. You're not going to think as clearly. It's going to make it more difficult for you. If you didn't have all those sugars, you would have much more clear thought. And then also about the energy of, oh yeah, if you think you're eating these sugars and this is going to help you, to have energy, it's actually the opposite. You're going to have this sugar crash. So then when it's time to play sports after school, you're going to not perform as well as you would if you had, healthier food to eat. Yeah. And kind of really just tuning them into this idea that, yeah, there are long-term effects, but what about the short-term things? Just right now, like how you're going to feel. Like if you eat all of these sweets and, put these things in your body, you actually are not going to feel as good right now as you would if you didn't. You get that high from the sugar, from the dopamine, but that goes away in an instant. And then you get the low, you get the crash. And so you're living in the crash. And I think when you position it that way, it can make a difference because then they start to see the immediacy of it and, want to live in the moment.
And in this next clip, we have the fantastic Dr. Gemma Newman. You may follow her on Instagram. She is the Plant Power Doctor. If you follow her, you'll understand that she is a medical GP, but she's also interested in holistic health, plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine. And in her practice, she has come to understand that the body, the mind, the soul are not separate. And only by addressing the root causes of stress and disconnection can we truly heal from the inside out. I was absolutely delighted to have Dr. Gemma Newman on the podcast because she has written fantastic books. And her book, Get Well, Stay Well, The 6 Healing Health Habits Everyone Should Know, is out now. And it combines medicine, psychology, and nutrition. And we really delve into the understanding of this alongside ADHD so we can find these tools and these practices that can help us feel and stay well from the inside. Here's my conversation with Dr. Gemma Newman. And I wonder, as a doctor yourself, like what would you say to women who are suspecting that they've probably had ADHD and or autism for most of their lives, and they want to go and speak? Because I get these messages all the time and they say, I'm very curious, I think, or my child's just been diagnosed and I'm seeing a lot of the same traits in my child. And I often have to say to them, I think you need to make an appointment with your GP, because that's really where it begins. But I'm also very aware that a lot of GPs who aren't so well versed in all of this, they can be dismissed, and the trauma, they've had so much trauma through their life, and that sets them back even more. Is there any advice that you could give the listeners if they are wanting to go to their GP with potential ADHD diagnosis?
Yeah, I think my main piece of advice is to be gentle with yourself. You've probably experienced all sorts of things in your life that you're only just starting to piece together, and it can feel like quite a vulnerable time. And so with anything like this, getting a diagnosis can be helpful because it gives you a pathway, again, as I mentioned earlier, a pathway towards self-compassion. Your GP may not be an expert in ADHD or the diagnosis of autism, but they will be able to refer you to people who are. That being said, I don't know what it's like in your region, but where I work, there are horrendous, absolutely shocking waiting lists. And so, again, it's another hurdle, and it's another piece of the puzzle that is going to take longer for you to put together unless you have the emotional and financial bandwidth to seek private diagnosis. And many of my patients have done that. Many are still waiting for NHS diagnosis. Many have decided to go and see a specialist privately. What I would say is that it's highly unlikely that if you've found information online or you've had a journey with perhaps one of your own children and you started to piece all these patterns together, it's highly unlikely that you would be wrong. It's very rare for somebody to decide, I'm going to diagnose myself with ADHD or autism and not be correct. So I think, again, it's about being kind to yourself and understanding that, there are people out there who may become quite cynical, say, oh, well, everyone's getting a diagnosis these days. I mean, everybody's a little bit on the spectrum, and, try not to take it personally when people say things like that. Again, just accept that, there's still a lot to be learned and there's a lot of ignorance around it, but to be compassionate with where you are in that journey that you're facing, and know that, being able to get support perhaps from people around you is helpful as well. And, as you've rightly said, Kate, books like mine, they can provide a kind of a framework for you to just start to provide a little bit of love for yourself when you're going through these hard times and these hard realizations. Because when you look after your mind and body, it makes that sensitive nature a little bit more resilient to the pressures of life. So regardless of whether you can get your diagnosis or when you can get your diagnosis, these things are really useful regardless, because they can give you that time and space and accountability and honesty that you're going to need when you sort of start embarking on these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do try and tell people that, yes, it can be very important to get that diagnosis if you are seeking medication. But a lot of people, aren't interested in that medication route. It may really, really help and it may not. And so I always say, from a lifestyle perspective, if you are waiting for the NHS and you are on that very long waiting list, start empowering yourself, educating yourself, making those small changes, looking at where maybe your ADHD has shown up. And, I said at the beginning, we often have a lifetime of migraines, IBS. There's been some form of inflammation in the body, whether or not that's because there's been so much stress in our body because we've not understood ourselves, or we've not been able to cope with life that's been presented to us. We've been told it has to be done in one way. We have to work these hours. We have to be educated like this. We have to keep our home. And very often it's the women, because from a societal perspective, we've been told that this is the way we should be doing things. And as time is evolving, we're recognizing that we can break outside of these conformities, these boxes. And very often when the ADHD diagnosis comes, it gives a lot of women this new chapter, this new offering, an opportunity to see life differently and to begin new chapters. And maybe it's a career change. Maybe it's recognizing that where they're living, their boundaries, who the people pleasing, the overgiving, all these different aspects, all the compounding factors, that isn't just what we put in our body, which I think is vital, but it's the emotions that we're absorbing and what we're absorbing from around us that if we can release them, it does feel, it feels lighter. And I think it impacts our body, whether it's from a chronic pain perspective or chronic fatigue. We hear about this, fibromyalgia. I think you would agree that the mind has a huge impact on what's going on in our body, and being able to address that emotionally. And I love that you've done all the psychology and compassion focused therapy. Tell me a little bit about, we've both got an interest in tapping. Do you bring that into your GP practice? Do you teach people that? Is that something that you do for yourself? And what do you think about that? Because I know that some people think it's still a bit woo-woo, but I personally think it's incredibly helpful.
No, you're right. I think it can be extremely helpful. And I've actually included it in the book, which I forgot to mention. There's a chapter here where I've included emotional freedom technique tapping. I do include it in my practice from time to time, and I can direct people to it if they're interested in the book as well. And having said that, it's always nice to have an official practitioner to take the time to really go through it with you and help you come up with the most useful scripts for you. So I suppose just to give people a background, it's a lovely combination of physical therapy and psychological scripts combined. So the tapping is essentially a way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and your psychology by just very simply tapping on a few different body parts which are related to the meridians of the body, interestingly. So that's bringing in some yang sheng, some Chinese wellness medicine, if you like, but also more traditional Western style psychology scripts that will help you to perhaps reframe what you're currently experiencing. So yeah, it was actually invented in the 1990s, and it can just be incredibly helpful for people if they're open to it. Yeah, I do. It's great.
I have lots of tapping videos on my website and on my Vimeo.
Oh, good.
So I always direct people to it. But I know that obviously you being a doctor, you like science-backed evidence as well to blend it. And there's an amazing woman in Australia called Dr. Peter Stapleton. And she's got a website, I think it's called Evidence-Backed EFT, Science-Backed EFT. And she's done lots of clinical trials to be able to show that when we do some tapping, we're able to help ourselves, whether it's with regards to maybe going through cancer treatment, like helping with the symptoms of chemotherapy. It can be pain, chronic pain, migraines. She's done on trauma. I mean, so many different things. And I think what she is brought to the world, which is vital, is to show that actually it really can work. And she's done these trials. So I like to be able to bring what she does into the equation so people don't think it's just sort of strange tapping and then, they're not quite understanding it. But I've always, from the minute I got diagnosed with ADHD, I'd already trained in tapping. And I couldn't work out why I found it so powerful, because I knew my nervous system was always heightened. It was always on this sort of sympathetic mode, I would call it. I never felt like I was in parasympathetic. And I couldn't work out why the tapping helped so efficient and effective. And I really do believe that tapping can be incredibly helpful for people with ADHD. And I've used it, myself, a lot of my clients now, my children. And so anyone who is in that kind of heightened state with anxiety, or they can feel, the cortisol, the stress response rising. And I always say, just try a little bit of tapping just to kind of calm things down. And it can be great with things like self-doubt, confidence, confusion, overthinking, all the things that potentially in our ADHD brains we're sort of all over the place. It just kind of settles things down. So I love that you, being a doctor, can really kind of advocate for it as well. It makes me very happy.
Oh, thank you, Kate. I'm glad. And it's wonderful to hear how much it's helped you. That's one of the things that I wanted for the book. It's interesting you mentioned about rates of things like fibromyalgia, chronic pain. There are so many chronic illnesses that are on the rise, especially in younger women than ever before. And again, I think very often it's that disconnect between our emotional world and our physical world. And I think the society that we're living in, there are so many pressures on us as well, external pressures, ways that we have to conform, which affect the way that we feel. And pressures, I think, just generally, the world isn't very kind to people who are neurodiverse, and the world is still not very accepting of difference, much as we like to think that we are. And so I just think it's so important for us to feel understood and to feel as though we're accepted for who we are. And yes, of course, there are even more financial pressures than ever before, which I think plays more of a part in it than people who are into wellness online like to admit. We can sort of do forgiveness letters and tapping and eat as healthier food as we can. But if we can't actually even afford to buy food, and we can't afford to make rent, and we can't afford to live in a way that we want to live, that in itself is a huge stressor. And that's something that is really hard, because it's not something that a book or a program can take away. But at the same time, it's why I wanted to share these messages, because everything in the book is free. We don't have to spend out on expensive biohacking, wellness tools. Yeah. It's literally all free, apart from your groceries, which you're always going to have to buy.
We want to be able to feel empowered with our own health and to be able to make decisions based on knowledge, and not what we have been told, through our family or through conditioning or through the society that we've been brought up in. It's being able to find these sort of, I know you've got the gloves framework, and maybe you could talk about that, but just to give people that knowledge that they can make decisions and choose. Could you tell us what the gloves framework is and what really inspired that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to make it really memorable for people. And I did that with an acronym, and it turned into a framework. So GLOVES stands for gratitude, love, outside, veggies, exercise, and sleep. Gratitude, love, outside, veggies, exercise, and sleep. And in each of those sections, I build up a picture of why. First up, I start with emotions, our emotional world, and the power of gratitude, the power of love in all its forms, and how that can help us to feel a lot more connected with others, connected with our highest self, connected with our higher purpose, connected with the moment that we are now living in, connected with grief, connected even with things like shame, how we can navigate all of the emotions of the human experience and bring us back to that place of gratitude. So there is an awful lot that's covered in that first 2 chapters when it comes to staying well or getting well. And then, of course, the more traditional aspects of lifestyle medicine also come into play. So nutrition has a role. I included some recipes, also exercise. I included some active relaxation as well, which I think is important for people with neurodivergence as well to consider. So Qigong is included in the book as well. And sleep, again, something that many ADHDers may struggle with, is something that I've included, not just why it's important and, all of the things that can make people nervous about not getting enough sleep, but also real practical tips to help them get more of it, and also discuss insomnia in general. So it's really broad. The outside chapter also was really important to me, because I wanted to really emphasize what we underemphasize in society, and that's our connection with nature, because we are nature. And it's something that we're really disconnected from, I think, in the modern world, and can drive huge elements of our mental and physical health. So it's the framework that I've used, and people can make their own personal template based on all of the aspects of those 6 pieces of the framework. And I made it super simple, because I know how important it is to really make things accessible and just being able to take that first step. So there's just literally a 3-point plan that people can make at the end of the book, which I'm actually most proud of, because I think sometimes it's so easy, especially, with ADHD, some people may really struggle to get through the whole book, because it's a chunky book, but it's hopefully easy to access. Yeah. But being able to put their own plan into place and come back to it, I think, is also really important. And, the understanding as well that you won't necessarily always stick to the intention at the beginning of the plan, but there's a plan for not sticking to the intention too. So. Yeah.
I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did and it resonated with you, I would absolutely love it if you could share on your platforms, or maybe leave a review and a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please do check out my website, adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk, for lots of free resources and paid for workshops. I'm uploading new things all the time, and I would absolutely love to see you there. Take care and see you for the next episode.